Nature Works podcast. Conversations with extraordinary guests who are working to protect, regenerate, and better understand the natural world. With your host, Mike Weeks.
Welcome to Nature Works podcast, where this week I'm speaking with Olly Pemberton. And I can't lie, I am jealous of Olly's life because he's a professional cameraman, director and producer, and he specialises in nature-based videography, the sort of stuff that I used to salivate over when I was a kid and wish one day I could grow up to be just like him. It's worse than that, as you'll find out in the podcast, because he has filmed and been up close to two of my absolute favourite animals. And so in this episode, we discuss Olly's wild childhood growing up in the island, or on the island of the Isle of Man. We talk about his 2-week-long forced relationship with a sparrowhawk, and also being charged by hippos in pools in the Okavango Delta, as well as a once-in-a-lifetime encounter. Oh my goodness, I hope I get one of these before the end of my days. A once-in-a-lifetime encounter with a snow leopard high in the Indian mountains. And it almost didn't happen, as you'll hear Olly tell. Now, if you enjoy this episode and others, and why wouldn't you? These people are absolutely brilliant guests that we're having on. Well, please do share the podcast with other folks who care about the natural world. Nature Works podcasts always free of sponsors and advertising, and our aim is to provide honest and unbiased insights as best we can into how we can help protect, restore, regenerate, and actually I need to start adding this here, rekindle for many people an interest, or dare I say it, a love of the natural world. Olly.
Mike.
Nice to meet you.
How are we doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm going to warn you, whatever you say will be held against you in a court of law because we're recording already.
Where are you recording from? This looks like a snazzy booth.
It's pretty snazzy. Hold on a second. For the we've got a proper setup in here.
God!
We've got a full podcast studio. Hold on, I need to move that back. Yeah, so our office here in Bali, smack in the middle of one of the most beautiful areas with rice paddy fields and stuff. We've got a really nice office at the front, and then the back end is our podcast studio, which, because there's so much noise that goes on at a certain time of day with bikes, we've just basically built a cave. So it's a soundproof cave.
Right.
Which is not very good if you're claustrophobic, but a delight if, like me, you like tight enclosed spaces and also like to get away from your kids.
That sounds idyllic, and I'm in Bristol at the moment. There's apologies if there's clanging around in the background because there's people putting up scaffolding, which I didn't really like.
You didn't plan for that, did you?
Didn't plan for that. No, I might just try and chase them away. But that's the delights of Bristol. Kind of just the same as Bali.
There's always something going on in Bristol. It's my hometown, of course. I grew up there. And
that's what you said, yeah.
I'm a born and bred Bristolian, mate. Right? I can put the accent right back on, and I'm not even putting it on much because if you speak to my family, they sound just like this.
Amazing.
How long have you been in Bali? Only been in Bali 2 years, but I left Bristol when I was 16 and went on the road travelling as a rock climber around the world, and spent 10 years in different countries. And within a couple of years, was very aware of the fact that my Bristolian accent confused a lot of people, so started having to work on pronouncing my THs not as Fs, so it wasn't 33, it was 33.
33.
Yeah. Which part of Bristol are you in?
Totted Down.
Oh, nice.
Totted Down.
Yeah.
I've been there for a month.
It's a good part of the world. I remember when they used to give houses away for free in Totterdown because nobody wanted them, but it's gentrified now.
I could do with one of those.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. Please.
I grew up not far from there in Marksbury Road, which is still pretty bloody rough. I think it's one of the last remnants of roughness in Bristol. I love it.
Yeah, as you say, it's got There's parts with an edge, but that's like Bristol, isn't it? It's
Absolutely,
quite an edge to it.
Yeah. So you're there for lifestyle or for working with BBC Wildlife, or?
I'm here for. Are we? So what? Are we like? Is this part of? Are we started now, or
we started the moment you appeared on screen? Yeah.
I see.
The beauty of podcasts. Well, I actually. I don't know about you. I like the informal nature of a conversation like this. I don't have a set of questions for you. I have a set of. I have some areas I want to explore with you on this. Typically I start chatting to people straight away, so there's not like, okay, 3, 2, 1, now put on an act. It's much better to just get a real person.
But then we chat and you cut and edit and what have you, and
we have an editor.
We take
we'll definitely take this bit out. That's for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I know what you mean. I just had to understand the format of it. What we were saying. Absolutely. No. No, I moved down here. I was in London so originally I'm from the Isle of Man, and I moved to the Big Smoke, London I was there for about 10 years, and Bristol, is for exactly that, for lifestyle. Just if you leave London and you go 2 hours out of London, you're still in London. You know what I mean? Yeah. So here you're just the centre of, I sound like the tourist board for Bristol, but close to mountains, sea, climbing, all the good stuff that you want, really. Yeah. And as you say, for the filming community that you get here, it's quite a hub.
Yeah, very much so. Very much. I know a bunch of people who work at BBC, or used to. I don't know if it's still going. Is it still BBC Wildlife? Natural history, all up there.
Oh, very much. Yeah, very much so. I think if you shout BBC Natural History Unit here, I think a few people's heads would pop up.
Yeah, exactly.
And their hands up. Yeah, it seems to be a bit of a hub for it.
So you grew up on the Isle of Man.
Yes, I'm a Manxie. Exactly.
Which is now a special marine protected zone, isn't it? A UNESCO site or something, a biosphere or something pretty special.
Yeah, the Isle of Man, it's just, the more you're away from it, the more you become more of an advocate for it, more of an ambassador for it, because you realise how special it is. And I think the Isle of Man does sort of a good job, or at least not many people seem to know about this place in the middle of the Irish Sea, and it's a Celtic Viking island that is kind of steeped in history, and its biodiversity it's a UNESCO. The entire country is a UNESCO biosphere, so they're the only country in the world to be awarded an UNESCO biosphere status because of what they do there, and they've got a lot of kind of protected marine areas around the coast, and like all places, they're working on trying to be better. It's a funny place where perhaps in the past there'd been some negative perceptions about sort of like most island life, being behind the curve on a few things. But what I'm very proud about with the Isle of Man is that they sometimes are very ahead of the curve for the rest of the world. And I think its environmental awareness perhaps is really cool. You live in the UK and you think, that's a few things that the Isle of Man are doing ahead of the game than is happening here.
So did you? But growing up there, is that where you developed your love of wildlife and photography or camera work, or was that something that came later? Because I would imagine that is that you need to put do not disturb on, don't you? Is that your bleep?
Sorry, yeah, I'm just actually I'm going to get rid of all of these. Yeah. I'm going to get rid of all of these.
There's somebody emails. Saying, I just saw you live broadcasting with Mike Weeks on the NatureWorks podcast. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Which we're not doing.
Sorry. That's very unprofessional.
That's all right. There's a do not disturb up in the top right. It's got a little moon icon, I think.
I've just down.
Yeah, so I would assume living somewhere like that, where it's you've got a lot of access to the ocean, and also I've never been there, so I'm assuming there's still woodlands and quite a lot of wildlife. Probably a good place to foster dreams of going off to Africa and filming elephants.
No, it is. It's very safe there. So as a kid, you can just sort of get let out your front door and just roam in the mountains. I always kind of describe it to people as it's like a love child of Scotland and Cornwall come together. So it's kind of got that. You can have the Scottish Highlands in 1 minute covered in heather. You could be driving around and hiking up in the mountains, looking at hen harriers and covered in purple heather, and then the next minute you can be down in a kind of quaint fishing village with huge cliffs. It's got an abundance of life there, and it very much so did fuel that love for the outdoors. Obviously you're watching the Attenboroughs as a kid, as a bit of inspiration, but then you only need to just get out the front door. And as a kid on the Isle of Man, you could be snorkeling with a couple of basking sharks in the afternoon.
Wow.
Jump in and that was something I always noticed as a kid, was the amount of these great big sharks, and they were just there. They were just part of it every summer. You'd just be out on the boat and on a beautiful evening light, and you're seeing these like 7-foot dorsal fins coming through. And I think it's just, I don't want to chuck in stats on the biology side and sort of like make it up, but its richness of waters, I think, is something that really drew them to the island. Obviously, home of the Manx Shearwater, which would
is it?
Come. Yes, yeah. So like they would come there. We've also, I think it's not the biggest population, but I think that's where they were kind of, first recognised as having its kind of breeding colony.
Because they struggled for a very long time, didn't they? They actually became an endangered species, I think, or very close to.
Yeah, and you're going to have stronger populations on Scoma in Wales and things like that, but we retained the Manxness of it with the Manx Shearwater on the name. So, and you got bizarre things as well on the Isle of Man with. We got sheep with 4 horns, we got cats with no tails, we've got
people with 2 heads.
People with 2 heads, exactly. 3 legs. We got wallabies, wild wallabies in the north.
Wow. When were they imported?
They escaped from the zoo 50 years ago, and then they just decided to live about 100 meter, sort of like a 2-mile radius from the zoo, and they just nobody could be bothered to pick them up. I don't know. They just lived there. So if you go for a walk in the Currachs in the north, you will find wallabies jumping around, which is it's an interesting one, because it's a nice. It's a great story for the wallaby, but it's also locally it's terrible for the local wildlife. So there is a bit of a push to try and.
Is it? They're just like they're basically a big rabbit, aren't they? I mean, I've seen lots of wallaby. I lived in Australia for many years.
It's a good description. They do. It's funny because you think, wow, wallaby, and you're going to be confronted by a giant kangaroo sort of thing, and you see them in the bush, and they do look like sort of extended.
Not much more than the hair.
Rabbit.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's quite cool to say now we have native wallabies, but the problem is they are a bit of a pest. They are starting to, again, I go back to hen harriers. They nest in the grass land that in this area. So the wallabies start kind of creating these warrens and these paths through and just knocking all this down. So yeah, again, pros and cons of the madness of the wildlife. But again, it's a stunning place, and its pace of life on the Isle of Man is very slow, and you're able to soak in the wildlife. It's not a huge place, but you just feel surrounded by the richness of the wildlife you get there. You sort of come more tuned in. Every time I go home, I just sort of there's a lot of times where you can just go to the coast and you just literally you switch on. I'm sure you do in Bali there. You spend your time just like zoning in, but it seems amplified there. Call it cheesy. Maybe I'm again just being a proud Manxie, but
no, I get it. I think there's an attunement of the senses when you're in a context or an environment that has a richness of natural life. Yeah, it's actually the opposite here. So to look at it, you see green everywhere. But when you actually understand what enables that green, it's all typically chemical farming. Everything here down in the lowlands, it's different up in the mountains, but in the lowlands it's all monoculture, so it's all rice farming. And it's all with chemical inputs. And our company has a farm here that we're restoring acres of land with non-chemical bio-regenerative organic farming. And one of the first things I've done is put lots of set-aside areas so that all of the wild plants can come back in. We've also put in dozens and dozens of rows of wildflowers that would typically grow in this area, but are not because they're competition to the rice, to the local farmers. And now, and I'm a busy guy, but I can spend 20, 30 minutes just standing on the farm looking at all the bugs that have come in only 6 to 8 weeks. And that's the first time I've started, as you say, tuning in or adjusting my senses to the activity. Because before that, you could stand I could take you to any green field here that looks gorgeous. You won't see a single bug in it because it's sprayed within an inch of its life. And so we're bringing that back in. Now, don't get me wrong, there's lots of sort of hedgerow areas and streams and rivers and the likes, but in a developing country like this, it's also unbelievably populated. I mean, there's 290 million people here in Indonesia, and I don't know what the population of Bali is, but there are very few areas in civilized area, with access to resources, shops and things, where there's not just a huge volume of people. And so it looks green, and you have all of the ocean, of course, but there's not much wildlife. And all with the pollution, the runoff, all the plastic, we collect about 150 pounds of plastic every week, just out of one tiny stream. So, it's got some serious problems. When you talk about the Isle of Man, I want to, if it wasn't for the weather, I'd want to pack my bags and go and live somewhere like that, because of the pristineness.
Look, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like it's not an example of pristineness. I'm very proud of it, but there's always work to be done anywhere, and it's not separate from climate change. It's still, it's a place that needs to work better. Everyone needs to work better, but it's something that is nice. I think if you live in a city or you live somewhere in the busy UK, having that ability to go back and, as you say, tune your senses, or kind of, I hate using the word recalibration, but it does.
A good word.
It does almost feel like that, just sort of having that place.
But you must do that a lot, because you go into these environments as a cameraman.
Yeah.
And yes. I've stalked you on Instagram, and I've seen that you've got image or video footage and an image of two of my absolute favorite species, and I'm really jealous because one I've seen numerous times, and as a kid was obsessed by. I was an ornithologist as a kid, completely obsessed. Yes. All I did was bird watching and animal watching as a kid.
Oh yeah.
So I saw that you had that you were taking photos of sparrowhawk near your home during lockdown.
Yes.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then the other one, of course, is every wannabe wildlife cameraman, me being in that domain as as opposed to a pro like yourself, the snow leopard. I mean, my God, you got to film one of those, and both of those. And the reason I mention both of those is because they're both ferociously secretive animals. And so you must have to attune your senses enormously when you're going into the environments that you're going into, because you're not going to film people, you're going in to film wildlife that doesn't want to be filmed, especially snow lions and sparrowhawks.
Yes, exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Both of them, the sparrowhawk is something we see more in our life, and in the UK, it's you can see the sparrowhawk, and it's not as mysterious as the snow leopard, but yes, you still need to retain that level of respect to get a time filming it. That was quite funny because the sparrowhawk was in lockdown. I, for personal reasons, went back to the Isle of Man to be with my family during lockdown, and to do that, obviously the Manx government had set a total embargo on anyone coming through. Like the drawbridge was down, and as a current non-Manx resident, I couldn't even get back to see my family. So I did get back and had to do, bizarrely, the whole world had to do. You had to do these strange things to enable to see your family, but we had to rent an Airbnb in the mount, and this particular one, it was a beautiful spot up in the mountains, but myself and my brother were there, and we were there for 2 weeks to do our lockdown. You do your 2 weeks isolation before then being able to see your family, and you were basically sort of frog marched to your house that you were staying in. So I was like, okay, I've got 2 weeks in the space. What to do? The owners of the Airbnb said, well, you're a wildlife filmmaker, you'll be pleased to hear there's a sparrowhawk nest in the garden. And I was like, are you joking? So I spent basically 2 weeks just living in a bush in this house, in this garden, and it was on a hill, so that the tree in which it was living in was the same level as if I climbed up.
Wow.
It could be the same level. So it was in the bush for most of it. And at the beginning, it would dive bomb me, say, basically, what are you doing here? And then I worked out a system of, if I completely cover myself, and get more cammed up, I can just lie in there. And eventually, then you're able to see the chicks coming out, and you're seeing the feeding patterns. You're watching the dynamics of the. It was lockdown. Everyone went a bit weird, didn't they? But I got completely immersed in this sparrowhawk family life, and I was just sort of photographing them. It was very intimate. And this one particular moment where, right at the end, and my dad, bless him, he came to pick up my brother and I right at the end, and I just got to the moment where they're getting comfortable with me. And the chicks are starting to emerge, and I was like, "Yes, brilliant!" And then I just heard this, "Olly, Olly, we're going now!" Off they flew, and I was just like, "Oh, brilliant! Thanks, Dad."
2 weeks of patience.
This one moment, lovely, by the way. I missed you. So it's very intimate, but the snow leopard, though, is obviously takes a big level degree more, of getting out there, and the environment is a lot harsher.
Before we go on to the snow leopard, because there's a lot I want to ask you around that. The sparrowhawks, to have that degree of time imposed upon you, that actually to me sounds like an incredible privilege. That I'm not being.
No, you're right. You're right.
Just such an amazing opportunity. But did you find that you started to understand the creature more because, like you said, you were watching its patterns of the feeding and everything else? I mean, were there revelations that only unfolded over that regular time, or did you already know enough about hawks?
I'd never spent, I guess, that amount of intimate time with any wildlife before.
Right.
I think for most people, lockdown was the time of revelations, heartbreak, hard times for everybody. And you find these strange little wins popping up in a time that was enforced on you, I guess I'm very privileged and fortunate enough to find some wins in such a difficult time, because I know there's so many people out there who would say there was not one win.
Yep.
So to have, you're right, it was a huge privilege, because it was a strange time being forced into a lockdown, but to have that access to an amazing raptor right in front of me, I totally agree. Like, in terms of revelations, just having that intimate time with any wild animal, specifically an impressive one like that. And I think usually you see the female sparrowhawk a lot. You see that beautiful sort of white and grey plumage on the front. They're usually the main kind of, you sort of seem to see them as the main hunter. Whenever you see footage of sparrowhawks, it's usually the female doing the legwork. But it was quite cool to see the dynamics with the male popping in every now and again to say hello. A lot smaller, with a bit of a colour on the front, less impressive than the female. But seeing the feeding dynamics and how they chose certain trees to kind of guard the nest or look out. They had favorite lookout points. They had, you do become a bit of a sort of big brother camera onto its life. I had a great distraction, I would say, for lockdown life, just to be welcomed in or not welcomed in, sort of more enforce myself into their lives, but just to have that as a distraction from the everything was it was a real privilege.
And so did you come into cinematography through wildlife, or did that come after just learning to be a cameraman? Not just a cameraman, but a general cameraman.
Oh no, it all started. The wildlife and outdoors was always like a big part of who I was as a kid growing up. Like yourself, obsessed with birds, obsessed with collecting things in the garden, putting them in matchboxes, like going out and just, and obviously then you think, how can I spend more time in the outdoors?
Absolutely.
Like, how can I do this? And that as a kid early on, you are just an outdoor weirdo. And then you watch an Attenborough as a kid, like so many people in my industry. And you have that moment where you're like, these people are working out there. That's their job. Right. I need to somehow make that happen. So, I actually took that path after I knew I wanted to do that. And after university, I self-taught essentially. So I sort of left university and I said to myself, right, we need to do this outdoor filmmaking thing, as it were. But I didn't have a clue, like most people after uni, how do you get into it? And I was fortunate enough to meet amazing people, get some amazing advice from the British Natural History Unit. And I had three options: go back to school to learn filmmaking, but I didn't have the money, or go traveling around the world, arrogantly making films that no one would want to see, and I didn't have any money. So what?
There's a pattern evolving here.
Yeah, exactly. At the time, it's hard to do with no money and no skills as well. You just need to build up the skills. So one option that I took, which I'm very now fortunate for taking, was I joined an adventure travel company that enabled me to travel. And in that time, I would film. I'd make very bad films in my spare time. And we're talking now, 11 years ago when I started doing this. And I would do night school. I would do all the kind of things in my power to build up this skill set. I'd go to all sorts of courses and edit and build up. I joined the Royal Marines Reserves for 4 years to get sort of more outdoor proficiency and have that ability to just be absolutely in tune with not worrying about getting wet and cold, because they just instill that in you. So that was just building skills until eventually you make a film that somebody commercially goes, oh, that's quite nice, and then you realize you can continue it.
Which one was that for you? What was that film?
For me, it was filming with the travel company, and it was actually a husky expedition that they were running. And I was able to film that experience, and they used it commercially, and I realized that actually, this could lead on to something. We can actually make this into a profession, and the Royal We. And then, it led on from that, and it led on to being able to always had that passion to create impact films, always wanted to get more on the conservation side, more on the wildlife and outdoor, because also people are a huge part of the environment that we film as well. We can't just blasé pretend that people don't exist, and we want to film this idyllic world that is pristine without humans. That's more of the Disney sort of angle, isn't it? It's all utopia, but they are such a huge part in it, and a huge part of the story. And storytelling has always been, I think, a huge medium for the natural world. And that's, to summarize all of that, I love storytelling, and I think it's if you combine that with the outdoors and kind of the human element, you can create quite powerful mediums to sort of help both.
I think the storytelling is an essential. Storytelling and transferring that to some form of media is essential in the mission, if you like, to protect the planet. Because if you can't inspire a love for the natural world, for all the people who live in cities, who are not getting out into areas where they're seeing sparrowhawks or definitely not snow leopards, there's a lot of people who spend their entire lives in cities, and their only access to the natural world and their only access to understanding the need to protect it is through the sort of films that you make. And I mean, David Attenborough's probably done more to protect the natural world than anyone in any of the large organizations, just through the very fact that he's brought it to our homes and we've gone, holy shit, this is incredible. I will donate to the World Wildlife Fund. I will donate to Greenpeace, or whatever your flavor of cause is.
Absolutely. And it also just enables you to put a spotlight on things, people and initiatives that perhaps wouldn't be able to have that spotlight. And it's, again, you come back to the word privilege, but to be able to do that and give these people and organizations that spotlight through storytelling, it becomes more of a powerful medium. And when you see it kind of leading on to knock-on effects, you realize that, words are also very powerful. You do need articles and blogs, and that can explain somebody's story. But for me, through how I've grown up and that love for the outdoors and in bringing everything together, if I can take that and put it into a visual story, sound is also so important. But I find it an incredibly powerful medium, and how great to be able to amplify people's stories who wouldn't, because so many people are doing incredible things around the world. Even people who are just living in the environment are just day to day, just actually surviving in an environment that we would view as tough. Mm-hmm. They themselves are doing incredible things, way more than we could even imagine back in our kind of cushy lives in the UK. So, that it's often those stories, these kind of amazing people who, it's so nice to give them airtime and maybe, as you say, inspire others who watch it to go, that's what an incredible way to sort of view things. And
I watched your video. I wrote it down because I couldn't remember how to pronounce it. Ngumu? Ngumu?
Oh, Ngumu.
Ngumu.
Yes. Ngumu. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's some tough people in that doing some. What inspired that film?
Yeah, that's the less on the environmental side of things.
It's more social.
That is more. It's more social. Yeah, that is more. There's some incredible women on Kilimanjaro who are mountain guides.
Who have necks of steel from the looks of it.
Necks of steel. Yeah,
I mean, carry these loads on their heads.
Yes. So you get within the travel, a huge goal of many people around the world is to climb Kilimanjaro and say they're on the highest point of Africa. They've made the roof of Africa, and lots of people say they've conquered Kili, but I don't think there's anyone who's conquered Kili without the guides and the porters, because they carry all of your stuff. It's quite bizarre.
Just like Everest.
Just like Everest. This is the commercialization of mountains that we live in today. You've got the purist who's going off and climbing unknown peaks on their own. But if you want to do the big ones, that have more of a spotlight, your 7 summits, then you get in the commercial realm. And as you say, like Everest, Kilimanjaro is no different. It's great that it brings employment to the local people, because they become porters, and it's another source of income in quite a tricky area. But having people saying they conquered it themselves, we've moved on from that, guys. Like, just let's not try and veil that up. Like, you haven't. You have plodded yourself up to the top, which is fantastic. It's the feat. It is a feat. Well done. But let's give credit where it's due to the local teams. And I think in Ngumu, it takes it one step further, in the sense that it is a spotlight specifically on the female porters, because it's hard enough to be a porter itself, but to be a female porter, the bag carriers, and they're carrying 20 kilos on their head in a very male-dominated society out in Tanzania. It's hard enough to break into that, because it perhaps the perception was to be working in fields with the kids and staying at home. So to have this amazing group of women turn up and say, we want to work here carrying the bags, where the first perception was, you probably can't do this. This is too heavy for you. And they said, well, screw you. We do this with holding babies, in the fields anyway, so we can do this. And it took a small group of women to prove that they can also be porters and do it just as well as the men. And so Ngumu follows their story and follows them all the way to the top. And here's the kind of stories from their mouths, and how they find kind of working in a very male dominated area. And the travel company, Exodus Travels, who sponsored the film, they subsequently went on to creating the Mountain Lioness project from it, where every year, I think they're going for 3 years, but they want to, the idea being is that every year they are fully funding training for porters, female porters, to become 10 a year, basically, to become fully trained mountain guides. Because to get from porter to mountain guide with a significant pay rise, you have to go through English lessons, you have to go through various training, wilderness things. So it's very cool to say that 3 years on from that film, we have almost about 30 more female mountain guides on Kilimanjaro, which is wicked. Really, really cool.
So you're using a porter to take half your camera equipment up Kilimanjaro with them, I assume?
No. Do you know what, mate? I did think about it halfway through. I was like, can I have the help? No, I ended up like, I couldn't bring myself to doing that. So I carried it all on my back, and I sort of wrongly tried to film lots of on the move interviews to them walking to camera. And obviously that's quite tricky when you're walking up backwards in Kili with all this weight on.
Absolutely. So I've been in and a part of a number of TV series, and one where we spent 2 years going around the world on all sorts of incredible adventures. And it is way easier for the people in front of the camera than the people carrying the camera. You're having
Thanks,
to...
mate.
It is. I mean, look, you have to carry all the kit, then you have to be running ahead and catching shots. You might have to be running up to the side and catching wides. You probably doing something from behind. And if you're in an environment where, in this film that you're talking about, where you're trying to capture people at their most natural, you're also trying to not be intrusive, because the moment a camera comes out, it changes human behavior. Probably changes animal behavior as well if they know it's there, but where it changes human behavior, people become, unless they're accustomed to it, they just start behaving differently, and that's not what you want, because you can spot that a mile off on screen. Yeah. So, but what's the process like for you to go to a place like that and then spend, I would imagine, a week or so filming going up Kilimanjaro, right? How long were you there for?
That was 8 days. But with all these films where as exactly as you said, like you don't want to change the course of how, you know, with that particular example, you know, it's a moving engine. It's going to go from beginning to end, and they're going to be doing their job, and I don't want to intrude in their profession. So it's more on me as a filmmaker to sort of satellite them, like you know, just furiously running around as they're moving. You're kind of some strange moon to their planet.
You're like the collie dog that when you go for a 4-mile walk has done 30 by the time you get back.
Exactly. With the same amount of like passing out at the end of the day.
Except you're not allowed to pass out before them because you want to capture them passing out, and you want to capture the moon above their tents, and you want to capture the fire going out, and you want to capture the fire bugs
so true.
And the owl hooting.
So
it's non-stop.
Yeah.
It's non-stop.
It's non-stop. And then you know, because as you say, you've been running around, and then you capture all of that, and then everyone goes to bed, and then you have to download everything. Which usually takes about an hour or two. And then it's sort of midnight, and then you're up at 4 a.m. to get the sunrise stuff.
It's a bloody difficult job.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's just amazing to be out there. But yeah, it does. You do finish shoots, especially with this type of filmmaking, more kind of in, I guess, personal and impactful, but within the natural world. You just come back from the shoot, and you have that element of, what the hell just happened? And then you pass out, and then 3 days later you emerge from your coma, and you're like, great.
To look at all your footage and then have to spend hours sat on your arse in an edit suite.
Oh yeah, but no, I absolutely love it. I love the unpredictability of you can storyboard a film as much as you like, but within the natural world, you're never gonna storyboard those moments that just come from just nature doing its thing. And I love that. I love the unpredictability. Obviously, it's so key to have that. Why are you here? Why are you going to tell this story? How are you going to impact the people and places that you film in? But you've always got that element of excitement in you of you don't know what's going to happen. You know, and that's happened quite a few times on shoots.
We filmed for 2 weeks in the Sahara. I ran the Marathon des Sables with my wife and Jack Osborne. We were making the TV series Jack Osborne Adrenaline Junkie, which is when we went around the world for 2 years doing all these amazing stunts. Thank you ITV2 and the other channels for sponsoring the greatest holiday I've ever been on in my life. But within 2 days of arriving in the Sahara, and it was one of the worst Marathon des Sables for sandstorms up to that date, to the point where they actually, over 80 people dropped out on day one, and people were being hospitalized and sent off in helicopters, and one person was found in a coma, face down. It got up to 50 degrees. I didn't even know anywhere on the planet went to 50 degrees, and I ran through that heat. But by the end of day 2, we'd lost 2 cameras, reds, because of sand. That we just couldn't. And so, you know, our cameraman, Danny, was just, and we had 3 cameramen on that shoot, and they were just freaking out because we were down to 1 main camera and then a bunch of small supporting cameras for the rest of the 8 days there. And these are things that when you're watching it at home, you just never consider. You know, you're capturing these incredible environments, but you're sat watching it in your cozy armchair going, oh, that looks cold.
Yes.
The cameraman knows it was fucking cold because he sat there for 5 days filming penguins with 50 mile an hour winds in, you know, minus 20 or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And you have to capture, if you're doing a film within the natural world, you have to capture what it is to be cold. You're not just filming cold, but then, you know, that's it. You
can't narrate it.
You can't narrate it. You need to immerse people into what it's like to be cold. And to do that, you have to get very, very cold, capture the wind, get very, very windy, you know, but that's all part of the, you know, the whole picture of being able to be in all these environments.
What's been the most extreme location that you've been to for filming? Most difficult, most challenging?
Extreme. Well, obviously the variety is awesome, and for example, up in filming the snow leopards was at altitude and very cold.
Where was that, in Pakistan or?
That was actually in Hemis National Park in India.
Oh, okay.
But I think the most extreme. I mean, I've just literally come back from a shoot in Botswana on the Okavango Delta, and we transected from the north, the Panhandle, where the floods sort of come into, down to the very bottom where the buffalo fence is, where that ends the discernible wilderness section, as it were. And the whole point of the film is to highlight the polers who live, the Baye people who live on the Okavango. They're sort of the guardians of the Okavango. They are the lifeline. They live on it. They rely on it, but they also are such an important part of its makeup. So it was to go from the north to the south with them, highlighting their skills and their life. And honestly, like that, as a beautiful place that it was, there were some unbelievably tense moments, because the Okavango is, we talk about Disney wildlife. It is just an unbelievable amount of everything that you think of Africa. It's all in there. It's just been swept into the Okavango, and you've got just so many elephants, so many hippos. It is an absolute utopia of life. So for a filmmaker, it was just, point your camera somewhere and shoot as much as you can. But you're going down the Okavango on these, they're called makoros, which are these little canoes, which, for those who have visited the Okavango, I'm sure you've seen them. But in the north, it's very, very, very wild. There's no one. We didn't see anyone for I think the 10 days we were doing it. We didn't see a single soul until right at the end. And the main thing was the hippos and crocs. And I think it's that element of, you can do everything in your power to survive in the best way you can, but and mitigate danger and be prepared for things. But you can't really prepare for a hippo being under your canoe. They hold their breath for around 6 to 9 minutes. They can come up at any moment,
and they're aggressive.
And they're so aggressive. And you look for the signs. We had one particular day that will just stick with me forever, where you're just tense, that we went through this incredibly high concentration of hippos and crocs in this one stretch on the Okavango. And you'd get through one lagoon by you pole in, and you go through the papyrus grass, because what's happened is the floods hadn't come fully to that area. So still, you had to kind of bash your way through the papyrus grass, and you're really in the thick of it. And you'd come to a pool, and the polars, suddenly everything got so tense, so everyone was wired. The tension was palpable. You could just sort of feel that the laughing, jovial polars were just suddenly very, very serious. And every pool we went to, they would wait for 6 to 9 minutes to see if anything comes up. And then
before entering the pool.
Before entering the pool, you'd wait.
Interesting, because they'll flip you in the boat.
They would munch the canoe in half, and then you'd be having to run or swim as fast as you can. But in that pampas grass, in that papyrus grass,
with crocs and hippos everywhere.
Oh man! So yes, it was just such a proper expedition.
Are the guides carrying guns against something like that, or they?
No.
No. So they're being precautionary, not reactive.
They're using incredible knowledge and a lifetime of experience living in there. So they're probably laughing at how tense I felt the whole thing was, because they're just well, this is normal. But when you see them all switch into go mode, then it's quite serious. We just kept on doing.
Did you have any hippos or crocs?
Yeah, we had one, the classic cameraman thing. So, as the filmmaker, I'm sort of filming all the action, and then this bull hippo comes up right next to our canoe, our makoro, right there. And then it sort of, you have that Blair Witch type footage of me us jumping out and running to the side as it kind of came towards us. So,
and what did it do? I was just curious.
It was just mock charging us, really. But to be in that environment, it was again with them, and I wouldn't have lasted a second without their knowledge and their incredible skills that they've grown up there. Like I said, they've been doing it since they were tiny, knowing how to navigate these things.
And what was it about their culture that you were capturing then? What's the film?
It was more because if you go to the Okavango as a tourist, and tourism is the main source of income for these people who live there. And through COVID, it was like everybody, it was incredibly tough, and they didn't have any income whatsoever. So that did affect, how things operated in the Okavango, and it's to show people who do visit how important they are to the ecosystem, to encourage people to go, because that you will be sourcing them with income. But don't just view them as water taxis. See how highly skilled these individuals are. Give them again more of a spotlight into their lives and into the incredible wild area that is the Okavango. I met an amazing ecologist at the end of it, Dr. Mike Murray Hudson, who's a wetland specialist, and he was talking to me about the flows and the unpredictability of the flow of the water in the Okavango. And he just said, do you know what really appeals to me about the Okavango is that it wouldn't matter if you were there or not. It just would not matter at all. And I just thought, what a brilliant thing to have is that, he said, if the tree falls in the forest, it's that thing. It's just that if you're there, it just would not matter. And it's so true. It's just everything going on, just life.
I listened to an incredible podcast on, I think it might have been the Nat Geo, or it was BBC Earth, and it was all about the mapping of the Okavango.
Yeah.
And there's I don't know if it was that gentleman you just mentioned, but a conservationist who's lived there for 20 or 30 years who got sponsorship to be able to go from the very source to the very end of the rivers and the floodplains. And it took them months to do it.
Yes.
And they nearly gave up a bunch of times because they had to pull for days and days because the water wasn't high enough through this low-level water, mosquitoes and bugs and leech and all that stuff. But it just sounded, well, like going back in time before humans, where the degree of life is just so rich, it's been untainted, a bit like your man just said. What you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the Into the Okavango expedition. They went. I mean, we did a very small. We did the delta itself. They were going, I think, from mapping. I think it was like a 4-month expedition from the
source pools. The very source pools.
To map the entire thing. And this particular film was more about the people of the delta themselves. So I think that they had a more scientific look at the effect of the delta, which is going to take a lot longer. I mean, epic trip. I've only just sort of now doing that. I'm like, well, yeah, get me back there. Very refreshing, isn't it, to go to places like that? Again, how lucky to have that as to be able to go to places like that.
Botswana seems to me to be one of the African countries that's really got its act together. They've really emphasised conservation, tourism. I mean, they have an incredibly strong economy. They're one of the lowest on the corruption list, etc. But it's a good example. It's not a perfect example. It's a good example of how countries can lift themselves into the modern world without actually destroying the natural world as well, because they very much seem to have prioritized nature as maybe not above human progress, but certainly as a necessity for bringing in tourism. Special place.
Absolutely. They recognize it for sure. And I think, that there are other countries that I think it's very important to recognize both the human and the wildlife element. I mean, it's such a big problem, especially in areas, parts of the world where people are living in such wild areas and their livelihoods depend on hand to mouth, like feeding themselves. But then you have the problem of wildlife coming in and destroying it. You have such a different. I would. Botswana, yes, is a very good example of like retaining, but they still have their own problems of human wildlife conflict for sure. They've done very well at highlighting the beauty of the area. I think that every country in this area that has such spicy wildlife is going to have that human wildlife conflict. And I've done a shoot with Tsavo Trust in Kenya in February, and that was a pure focus on the human wildlife conflict element that you get in these harsh areas. And it's just incredible that what some of these organizations are actually doing to counteract and combat that. And there's some really amazing thought processes and initiatives going on right now that enable people to it's so easy for us to sit back and go, wow, aren't elephants amazing? Aren't they? Sorry, I'm sort of rambling now onto this subject of human wildlife conflict from Botswana. But
well, I'm going to ask you about the elephants, because I've got that written down here, because I know you've been working with elephant tracking, haven't you, on the latest project?
Oh yeah. So that was the Tsavo Trust thing.
It was.
So
right.
Yes. So these guys the Tsavo area is very harsh to live in. It is huge. It's an amazing wild area of Kenya that holds the tuskers. That's where you get your last remaining tusker elephants. Huge amounts of wild dog, but it's a very harsh, very different to the Okavango, which is just this utopia of life, which still retains that problem of human wildlife conflict anyway, which side note, in Botswana during COVID, of course, with the lack of jobs, that increased that conflict time. So still have that problem wherever, but it was really cool to be able to bring to life a story of an initiative that Tsavo are doing to try and balance out this perception of conflict within the local people who live on the fringes of Tsavo. And it's quite a cool model, I guess, that they're trying out that could be used elsewhere. Because I'll just sort of dive into it, because the people who live there, the Kamba, they it does not get a lot of rainfall in that area, and it is a hard place to, and especially after COVID, the moment you start growing something and you have to grow your own produce in that area to feed your family, an elephant will come in straight away and it will eat your green shoots. And if that happens time and time again, and you're not making any food for your family, I totally understand. Like, I would also not view that elephant. You can see how it gets to that element of bushmeat poaching.
Yeah.
You get it. You can't just sit back here in the UK on your sofa and go, how dare they, the sentient, beautiful creatures. Like, you're not living, you're going to have this conflict. So it was I was able to chat to a lot of these guys about how their lives have been affected by elephants, and I say specifically elephants because they are the problem, main problem. They just kind of bulldoze in, destroy everything, and come back out. So what they have done, Tsavo Trust, is they set up this thing called the 10% project, and it's a really clever thing. Is that let's say your shamba owner has
what's a shamba?
A shamba is like a farm plot.
Okay.
So he's got his own sort of farm plot, and he owns 100 hectares of land. Like, say, it's a huge area and they own a lot of land. Previously, these guys had been trying to farm sporadically on their land all over the place. So Savo with another organization called Tafauti, they came together, and they, with a system of hydroponics, they thought, what if we took 10% of that land that they had? So all of this land, what if we concentrated all of that into 10% into a fenced off area, and the area being, we're talking an elephant-proof fence that has porcupine sticks coming out of it, because elephants are super smart in the area. They know that their tusks don't conduct electricity, so they'll come up to the fence, they'll push it down, they'll get their trunks, and they'll pull out the fences, and then they're in. So these porcupine spikes enable them to not be able to get to the fence itself. Solar powered, high voltage, very simple to run. 10% area, and within that you intensely farm in that small plot rather than trying to do the huge area. And they found that in doing that, in this small area of protection, their yield of their crop yield increased 100-fold. Like they suddenly had this ability to actually grow something. And the benefit to the wildlife was that they had way more land suddenly to roam through. So your transient animals could actually pass through this area. So you had this model of suddenly the community had started to build this culture of conservation themselves. They themselves were an invested owner in the project rather than being told this is, what's going on. They were seeing the benefits of them themselves. And I think you see that so much around the world, is that what a successful model can be is when the people who live in the area, they become the invested owners in the project themselves, rather than somebody telling them how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so to see this firsthand, and to see, like, it's only in pilot stages, and they've done sort of, I think, 10 plots now that are all incredibly successful and working, and it's now growing. That was amazing to see.
I interviewed Steve Box, who's a famous PhD marine biologist, and he's one of the world's leading experts on fishery management and coral reef. And he was saying the same thing, that if you try and impose onto fishery areas all of these regulations and set-asides without getting the local community to own it, because in an area, let's say here in Indonesia, you'll have literally thousands of small groups of fishermen who are all dependent upon one ocean area. I mean, we're talking hundreds of miles. But within that, you'll have these almost sort of tribal communities. And they have to all come into agreement. And once they do, and once they are invested in it, and once they realize the benefit of it, then it takes off. Because they're also, they can't really protect their areas very much from large, let's say, Chinese fishing fleets who are coming in and doing bottom dredging. But they do manage to protect enough of the areas from their own fishing, because they've all agreed this area is set aside for a year, or this area is what we're only going to fish this one species, etc. And I think we've had far too long of the Western mindset of coming in and imposing on small communities that we know best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Elephants come first because David Attenborough talks about them.
No, this is it. I think it's just that is a very archaic. Personally, that's an archaic way of doing things. It just doesn't. It just is not going to be a long-term solution. Whereas, if you have the ability to think outside the box and help in that way, but ultimately it's their project, and then it benefits the greater kind of picture. That's just got to be the way to go.
You filmed something like that in Europe as well, in Italy, with the Italy's Wild Heart docu, and I only I didn't finish it. I got 3/4 of the way through on it.
That's okay.
And that's not because it wasn't compelling. It's just purely because of my.
Mega
I
boring.
watched all of your content in the last 24 hours.
Stranger Things 4 is much more interesting.
I haven't watched Stranger Things 1, so I'll have to take your word for that. But I watched that, and these rewilding projects for me give me real hope. I mean, we're trying to do it on a small scale here, so we can then show that it can be done on a large scale. Like, we don't need to be using chemical fertilizers and herbicides that ruin all the coral reefs and pollute all the areas and destroy all the insect life, which destroys all the bird life, which destroys, et cetera, ecosystem collapse. So we're trying to show it on a small area, and then we're going to expand. But it's really encouraging to see in Europe that there are countries like Italy that are doing it on a large scale.
There's a theme in a lot of the films that I've sort of had the privilege to make. The general theme that seems to be cropping up quite a lot in the human wildlife sphere is coexistence. It's how can you make coexistence work? Because we're here on the planet, the wildlife are here on the planet. Like, we're both gonna, for the time being, be neighbours. So it's addressing that in a kind of more sensible, less kind of romantic fashion, because we know that people have to live and farm and eat and all these things, but also so does the wildlife needs its areas to roam. It needs to build up. So we know humans are a big problem on the planet, but we are here too. So it's to see that in Europe. That was in the Apennines in Italy. It's in an area called Abruzzo, which is right in the middle of Italy in the Apennine mountain range, and it's where you find the last Marsican brown bear population, which is Italy's brown bear,
and wolves.
There's only exactly in the Apennine wolf, which is a sub kind of version of the European wolf. It's how wildlife used to be. This very ancient area, and it's mad to think it's only 2 hours from Rome, but you've got this area where this is what the wild things used to be like before we started expanding in such an aggressive way. So you do, like if anyone's in Italy, and if ever you go to the Apennines, it's so wild, and you've just got such an abundance of life, but it is peppered with human settlements and because of the it's very unchanged since sort of Roman times almost. The way of life up there is lots of farming and sort of living with the land. Because it's not sort of a through road or through route. You have to get to it. So the story and the project that I managed to capture, or tried to capture at least, because it was so incredibly complicated, was these initiatives and these real kind of amazing ways of working with the wildlife. Rewilding Apennines was the organization, and again it comes to building up this culture of conservation, because you're getting a lot of clashes with the shepherds will have a lot of their flock taken by wolves. The bears will also, that's fair game for them. They'll go in and trash the honey areas. That bears will be falling into wells. It's trying to so it's through an idea of corridors. The Apennines are broken up into a few national parks and protected reserves, and so what the Rewilding Apennines team are doing and working with are creating these corridors within each national park, and within those corridors these are areas where everything they would call them coexistence corridors. Within these areas, agreed with the farmers and agreed with the people who live in them, they will bear-proof the hives. They will work on covering the wells. They will work on taking away barbed wire. They will create these easy corridors so that if the farmers see that in doing that, their produce increases, they are able to farm better. And without these clashes, they recognize that the wildlife bring benefits. So again, it's that win-win concept. And there's actually a town called Petorano sul Giuzio, which is the first bear smart community, they call it, where the whole town is in on this conservation. The entire town wants to build a utopia for bears and wildlife alike around it. Incredible. And the whole model is wicked. Like, it's really cool because it's just showing that on a very small scale in this area, like, it can work. And I think, like, if you're going to start trying to rewild the world in its concept, because we know this concept of rewilding is, it's quite an appealing thing, isn't it? Everyone's like, rewilding this, rewilding that. It's great. But I think, like, from what they were sort of showing me and what the Savo guys are showing me, is it seems that starting very small seems to be like the way to.
Well, it's safe to fail when you do it small.
Safe to fail.
And that's
exactly.
And in a complex situation where you can't predict the outcome, you have to make safe to fail experiments. We've got 10 raised beds with different plants in to see which ones are going to work on a farm, because I don't want to put 10 beds of oregano or asparagus in to find out it doesn't grow very well here. So you want to do these safe to fail areas. But so in that footage, there's footage of the bears and there's footage of the wolves, and the footage of the wolves looks like you got quite close to them, which I'm really surprised that you managed to get that kind of footage in. How long were you there for?
I was there. I only had 2.5 weeks to film this project, and it was super ambitious. You know, it was, I'm going to go and film bears. I'm going to go and film this. It's such an arrowant way of saying.
And you did.
Planning. No, I mean, the bear footage, I've got to say, I managed to speak to a wildlife filmmaker who lived nearby called Bruno, and he was able to help me with the bear footage because I didn't see any.
Oh, right. Okay. So you borrowed that footage.
It's not mine. But some of the wolf stuff was shot by myself, and I was so lucky because it was a lot of sleeping near carcasses.
Okay, you were baiting them, were you?
No. These were I'd say cattle or any wildlife that, you know, if you can see from, you get wind of a dead animal nearby, and it's luck of the draw if you set up a hide nearby.
Okay, so it's a naturally dead animal. You haven't brought in some
food.
No.
We haven't. No, absolutely not. No, we're not there to like change the course of the.
Because I know some BBC was it BBC Earth? There was a controversy over them filming golden eagles eating a fox carcass because they found out that they bought the fox carcass from a local hunter or trapper and put it out, and then they came in, and I didn't see that as a big deal, to be honest. I mean, they kill foxes, and the chances of actually being able to film 2 wild golden eagles killing a fox is going to be pretty rare. So
agreed.
Sticking down a dead goat, well, maybe not a dead goat because that's only going to encourage more. A dead fallow deer or whatever local species, but you didn't have to.
No, it's a tough one because you want to show the subject in a kind of close, intimate way, but you don't want to like change its course of its natural course of doing things. It was a cow carcass, so from a farmer, again, because it's such close proximity to, you're in the wild, but these cows are roaming also pretty wild as well. And it had died, and we got a sort of tip off that it was a relatively fresh cow carcass. So it was luck of the draw, you know, sitting in this beautiful area with a stinky dead cow just down the road, you know, and just set up a hide and just waited in the rain for 2 days, I think it was. It was one evening and one and then the next day. It was lots of early starts and lots of revisiting the cow carcass, and again, the time frame is quite short because you got to film the rest of your whole project. And it was just gone. It's just one last sit by this cow that was in the middle of nowhere, and out came the Pennine wolf just sniffing around. So lucky, because they are very elusive. It was a long shot, really was a long shot. You can do, it's good, with wildlife filmmaking, you can do all the planning in the world, but then the last bit is and setting yourself right and making sure you've got everything lined up and you're camouflaged in the right way and you're set up so that you just need to press that button. But then obviously your film style needs to turn up.
Yeah, it's like being a hunter, and many people come back empty-handed. I mean, more people come back empty-handed than do.
I have so many times that I've just been filming bushes.
Yeah.
And I've got so many, just willing a bear to arrive. Come on.
I have a friend who's a bow hunter. He lives in Washington State, and he goes to Idaho. He goes to Wyoming. He gets all of these tags, and I think deer are relatively easy to get, but he goes elk hunting, and I'm pretty sure the last 4 years when he's sending me videos of him elk hunting, he can hear an elk, he can see tracks of an elk, but he's not for 4 or 5 years, and he's a really good hunter. He's not caught an elk, he's not shot an elk because you've got to be close to it.
This was it. We were seeing wolf prints everywhere. We were seeing wolf scat. We were seeing what they're eating. There were just loads of it around. We're like, where are these wolves? It's not going to see them. And again, coming back to that senses dialed, you sit there with the rain pattering on your kind of makeshift camouflage, and you're just listening to everything, the wind going through the trees, the cracks. What was that? Oh no, sorry, that was my dinner, sorry. Everything, you're hoping that's something, hearing that's something, and it's quite cool. The process of that does again dial you back in.
Your senses get numbed when you're underwater, and I saw that you've got photos of you with tiger sharks.
Oh yeah,
big tiger sharks as well, not small ones. And are you baiting those, or are you just going in an area where they're known to be?
That was for the Fuamula Marine Conservation Project in the Maldives, and they have a huge concentration of tiger sharks in that area. It's an amazing island because it's not like the rest of the atolls that are kind of these lagoon type things. This is right out in the southeast part of the Maldives, which is open ocean, so it drops off really deep really quickly, so you get quite a lot of the big stuff coming really close to land. And these tiger sharks live by the harbor because they know that that's where
food
a
scraps.
lot of the food scraps, everything. They're amazing tiger sharks. They're essentially these great big dogs underwater. They're with very big teeth, but the way they act is they'll be sniffing around. And I'd never swam with such big sharks before. I'd never.
What was what was that like?
You die. Oh, it's epic. Yeah. You jump off the boat. You know that you're only 8 meters down. It's not very deep, but you know that they're around, and you can hear the thudding of the engine above your head. And the guys do chum. They chuck a bit of some scraps of fish down, and it kind of floats down. But again, you have this sort of bit of a cloud of blood around you, and you just the thudding and the sort of you're on edge and you're looking around, where's it going to come from? And then just suddenly from the murk then in come these tiger sharks, and they were I was like, oh my god, they're massive. They are absolutely massive. They're not interested in you in the slightest because there's food. There's also plenty of food in the area anyway, so all these kind of thoughts of, oh my god, it's going to come for me, that goes.
You're not naturally their food anyway.
No, not at all. No, in this moment, you're going to get bitten by a shark by In the same way, if you put your hand in a hungry dog's dog bowl, you're going to get bitten by a dog. And that's just really stupid. Why would you do that? So you get to observe these massive tiger sharks right up close. And it was awesome. You know, they're swimming right by you and sniffing around, looking at you, and just sort of, just that you can see they're just really powerful, but also just no threat whatsoever.
Do you have to control your movements in a particular way? Obviously, they're attracted to commotion and struggling.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to really want to start, thrashing around and annoying it. You just sort of need to, again, like all things, be quite respectful to a natural course of things. So you need to sort of maybe try and hide behind a rock, or just chill out and sit down. Sit down and be respectful. And also when you're trying to film, obviously you do need to be steady. So that in itself kind of is quite useful, because you're just having to regulate your buoyancy and you need to keep yourself steady. So in doing that, you sort of calm yourself down. And that's quite cool.
So what are you working on next? What's the
next project? Well, I need to edit this Okavango thing. I've got a load to edit there, and I need to finish editing the Savo Trust film. So we have 2 big films that are going to be coming out quite soon. And then there's a potential shoot with an amazing company called Nature Metrics, which they do a thing called the eBioatlas, which is essentially working out what species live around water sources. So you do eDNA. So you basically take like a syringe sample of a water source, and it will tell you what lives in that area. So it's a more kind of concise way of mapping the wildlife rather than visually seeing it.
And that's all that's DNA, is it?
Yep. Yeah, in the water. Yeah. So it's
incredible.
These guys are going out there to create this big atlas around the world of what we have on our planet, but in a more concise way than visual like aid. Because a lot of these, especially in water, it's hard to say what actually sort of lives in the area. So that's a project that is in works at the moment.
And your current films, and when you finish editing the 2 that you're working on now, where can we watch those? If
we're lucky enough that it'll go on to various film festivals, the film festival circuit. It's mainly in online platforms, socials. We were really lucky with Ngumu was to got into the Kendall Mountain Film Festival, and it's great that you can take these films and go onto a wider circuit around the world with them. I really enjoy that platform. They are more online, I would say.
Yeah, well, I watched, as I said, the Ngumu and the Rewilding film on YouTube, but they were on other people's channels. You don't have a channel on there yourself, or you do?
I mean, I've got.
Where can people find you? I mean, it's Olly_Pemberton.
I'd say probably, to be honest, I would probably say the best thing is Instagram these days, isn't it? I have the website, my own personal website, but
what's the domain? Ollie, you're doing a terrible job of advertising your website and Instagram here. You meant to give us the domain, or don't you know what it is? I can tell you if you want to know what it is.
No, thank you. I would be more forthcoming with it. All right, guys. If you want to check it, exactly. Let me do better. How do I do it? Do I do a bit more of a sales pitch? Do I help my...
you do it however you want. Yeah. Everything was fantastic up to the point where you had to sell yourself.
I know, it's awkward, isn't it? If you want to check out more of my stuff and more about the projects that I've been working on and see more on the visual side of it, Olly OLLY _Pemberton PEMBERTON. That's my handle on Instagram. It's probably going to be the best place to see that. And then my website, where you can actually find out a little bit more detail of some of the projects and how they've impacted, how we work on the impact areas in the subjects we work on. 4 Horn Productions. That's just 4 Horn Productions.
Number 4 or word 4? FOUR.
FOUR, sorry, that's a good point. FOUR Horn Productions.co.uk. Four horn because that's a good nod back to the Isle of Man with our 4 horn sheep that we have.
We'll put all the links into the show notes. Anyway, before I let you go, because I'm aware of time, that snow leopard.
Yes.
We didn't entirely complete the story. How the hell did you end up being able to film it? Because it has to be one of the most elusive creatures on the planet. And you said you were lucky. Yes. How many days did you have to be in the mountains to be lucky? Or did you just get out of a car and there it was?
You know, a lot of the shoots that I've been on, because it's low impact, unfortunately you don't have endless budgets like the bigger the bigger productions perhaps can be there for about 3 months, but we had a cap on that. So I'm bringing the sort of realism side to the story, is that you can't, if you like, you can't just go off for months on end. You have a certain time frame. So we had 12 days to try and ambitiously snow leopards. Yes.
And which day did you film it on?
On day 11. Like literally the day out, like we were leaving. So, and I say luck, like it was luck, but I wouldn't have had any of this luck if it wasn't for the local team who I was working with. The guys from in and around the Hemis National Park work for, they're often guides in the area, and they're spotters themselves. So I had these 2 amazing guys with me, Tamchos and Wungil, and it was Tamchos who found the snow leopard on day 11, as we were literally packing up, and we were in a place called Rumbak, which it was pretty, I can't remember the altitude, but it was definitely near 4,000, so enough to sort of feel your breath lagging a bit.
Meters, not feet, just so people realise.
Meters, yeah, sorry.
12,000, above 12,000 feet.
Yeah, just above sea level. Yeah, dead easy, very hard. Yeah, we haven't got very high mountains in the Isle of Man, so
probably about 4,000.
Yeah, exactly. And it had the most snowfall, I think they said, for the last 10 years in the area. So it was incredibly hard trudging around, up to waist deep snow, just walking around at that altitude with all your kit. And I had this massive lens, this 800 millimeter small pony of a lens. It was ridiculous because I wasn't going to take any chances, because, as you say, they're so elusive, and they'll be in the other valley, miles away on a small dot. But Tamchos found this thing. I had all but given up, and we were spending the morning with this beautiful family in the Rumbak Valley, in their house, and they were sort of, we were having buttermilk tea, which is the usual kind of tea out there, which wasn't a huge fan of, but it was it's quite bitter. But it was, when it's that cold, you're like, oh yeah, that'll do. And we're just chatting, and Tamchos just ran in and said, I found it. And I was just like, unpacked everything again, ran out, and it was the other valley that he was looking at. I mean, just a huge distance away, kilometers away. So we then,
but still there by the time you got there.
It was a mating pair. So he was like, so we looked at it, and that moment of looking at the snow leopards, because like I said, we'd been searching all the 11 days, and like I said, I'd sort of pretty much given up, but Tamchos just didn't want to give up. I was like, no, we're not going to see them. Let's enjoy breakfast. And he goes, well, let's just go out and have another look. So, all right, fine, let's go. And when we found it, he found this mating pair sitting on high up, and he said they're not going to go anywhere because they are sort of into their moment now. So we can try and get closer. So we climbed up and up and up and up through the snow and with all this heavy equipment, and managed to find a sort of bit of a cliff edge to hang on to and set up this enormous lens. It was quite funny because it's the I don't know if you've seen Walter Mitty, Secret Life of Walter.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
There's that moment where Sean Penn is sitting there and he's like, some things are just not worth filming. I thought about that for about 3 seconds and thought, absolutely bugger that. I'm going to film this. I'm like, I am here to film the snow leopards. So I got the sentiment, but I was like, no, let's film.
Well, I'm glad you did. The footage, I saw the footage on your Instagram, but is there anywhere else where that can be seen? Because it's a short amount of footage on Instagram, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it's a short film. In the search of the snow leopard. Again, it's online, and again, more details on Instagram. I think is the best place to find them. But yeah, incredible. It was one of the most. I would say it's one of the best wildlife. Well, just moments in general. It was so special. You stayed filming these guys until, and then it was only until Tamcha said, we do need to get down because it's getting dark and this is not safe. And you get so engrossed in these guys' lives, filming them. And I just didn't want to leave. I did not want to leave these snow leopards, but you have to just, for that brief moment, just accept it. You've got to go, nod thank you to them, and then pack up. And then we had to climb in the dark, which was a bit spicy, to be honest. It's not great, but you're just buzzing. It's those kind of moments that make it all worthwhile.
I can't say I'm not jealous. I can't say that I'm not jealous that you're living the life that in the alternative reality I would have liked to have been living. But I think
you're about to jump out and go surfing in Bali. So
I'm not. It's 6:30 p.m. on a Friday, and I'm about to go and have dinner before my next podcast. But I'll be I'll be surfing tomorrow. Yeah, and if you ever want to come and visit Bali,
I've never been.
I guess
I would love to. I love surfing on the southwest coast here, but it doesn't have that same appeal, I'm sure, as Bali.
No, it's pretty special here. Ollie, thank you for your time. It's been a complete blast, and I can't wait for people to hear all these different stories and all of these different adventures you've been on. We'll get you back on after the next couple of adventures so you can update us on what you've been doing.
Awesome, mate. Thanks so much.
Thank you.